The retired German shepherd stood rigid in the cool Idaho dusk. His breaths came fast and shallow, eyes locked on the neighbor's garage. He ignored the toy his lonely owner tossed. He ignored every comfort of his peaceful new life. He was supposed to rest now. He had earned his quiet. But something beneath that cracked concrete was crying for help. Just 20 feet away, buried below the garage floor, a little girl clung to a tiny puppy. She was starving. She was bruised. She was praying for someone to hear what she was too weak to shout. No one else knew she was there. No one else heard the tapping on the wooden hatch. But this dog, he smelled the terror. He smelled the darkness. He remembered the scent of evil. What happened next will make you wonder what stands stronger, the cruelty of those who hide secrets, or the loyalty of a dog who refuses to forget he's a hero. Before we begin, where are you watching from? Tell us your country in the comments below. A soft Idaho dusk draped quiet suburbs in pale gold warmth. Ethan Cole stood on the back deck of his modest single-story home in Boise, hands pressed against old cedar planks that needed sanding even more than he needed peace. He was 38, tall with broad shoulders built by a decade of police work, dark blonde hair clipped short, jaw usually shadowed with stubble since he stopped caring about a razor. He had the look of a man once forged by purpose, but now eroded by grief. Blue eyes that carried too many sleepless nights and a mouth that scarcely remembered how to smile. It had been 9 months since the accident took Hannah, the woman who painted light into his life. The crash left him physically healed but emotionally fractured, drifting like a ghost who still punched in his address by instinct. His only anchor was Bruno. The retired German shepherd lay near the porch steps, a powerful 95-pound guardian whose black and tan coat had grayed around the muzzle. At 8 years old, Bruno still held the discipline of his canine days, back straight, ears sharp, a scar tracing along his hind leg from a warehouse bust gone bad. He was a working dog forced into rest, carrying duty in every muscle and a sadness that mirrored his handlers. Ethan tossed a tennis ball into the grass. It bounced once, twice. Bruno didn't move. The dog's amber eyes never shifted from the tall wooden fence separating Ethan's yard from the neighbors. Those neighbors, Becky and her boyfriend Travis, had moved in 3 weeks ago, both white Americans around their early 30s. Becky was slender, dark-haired, pale skin, like porcelain constantly powdered to hide stress she pretended she didn't have. She smiled politely, but never warmly, and always seemed out of breath from hiding something. Travis, heavier with a bald head and permanent smirk, wore sleeveless flannels that revealed a dragon tattoo badly done and a temper worse hidden. Ethan didn't know them and didn't want to. He'd spent months trying not to know anyone. But Bruno knew something. The dog stood abruptly, the thick muscles along his spine rising like a ridge. He stalked to the fence, nose pushed into a narrow gap between 2 slats, sniffing like he was memorizing a crime scene. A low rumble vibrated in his throat. Ethan exhaled in frustration. "Bruno, buddy, not today." He pressed his palms into his aching eyes. Grief had sanded him down just like the porch, rough in places, splintering in others. He had lost the part of himself that used to act before fear could think. Now he collected tools instead of courage. He replaced memories with silence. He survived. That was all. The dog ignored him, claws clicking on wood, pacing tight, fast loops from one end of the fence to the other. The rhythm grew frantic. Ethan felt tension crawl beneath his skin. An old instinct, a tactical mind waking up from enforced sleep. "It's just squirrels," he muttered, though the lie fell flat. Bruno never barked at squirrels, not even when he retired. Ethan stepped closer, hand brushing the dog's back. The fur stood stiff, heat thrumming beneath. Bruno's head was angled, ears locked toward the neighbor's garage looming behind weeds and rusted bicycles. The garage door looked swollen by years of neglect. A small window boarded over with scrap wood. A place dishonest with its quiet. Ethan's heartbeat ticked up. He didn't want adrenaline. It reminded him too much of sirens and trauma reports. He kept reminding himself that he was no longer Officer Cole of the Boise Police, just a man wiping sawdust off a shirt that used to fit better. But Bruno made the decision for him. The dog suddenly let out a sharp, restrained woof. Short, professional, the kind reserved for human scent hidden where humans shouldn't be. Ethan froze. He had heard that exact sound before, moments before kicking down doors, moments before victims were found. His hand clenched involuntarily, phantom memory searching for a badge that no longer rested on his chest. Bruno's body pressed forward, paws digging at a rotted board low on the fence where ivy tried to hide decay. The wood creaked, splintered slightly, not yet broken, but close. Ethan's pulse hammered through ribs as if trying to escape. "Bruno, leave it." His voice was meant to be firm, yet came out pleading. The dog didn't turn, didn't blink. The soft evening air felt tight, like the breath before a verdict. Ethan looked again at that boarded window, that dark garage corner swallowed by shadows. A pressure overcame him, an unspoken dread whispering that this wasn't about squirrels or boredom or a dog missing his job. Something wrong breathed over there. And Bruno, the one creature who refused to let Ethan give up on his instincts, had just sounded the first warning. Ethan swallowed hard. He didn't know what waited beyond that fence. But he knew this. Grief had taken everything that mattered once. He would not let it make him blind now, not if a life was on the other side of that wood and darkness. Bruno scratched the fence again, harder. Ethan whispered to himself like a prayer he wasn't ready to believe in. "Not again. I won't miss it again." Boise's night air cooled fast, washing the sky into deep navy as porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood. Ethan Cole stood by the old fence, the weight of a decision pressing into his bones. His heartbeat drummed too loud in his ears, and Bruno's low growl throbbed like a warning pulse at his feet. From the other side of the fence, Ethan could see movement. Shadows slipping behind the garage like frightened figures caught under a spotlight. He hated this feeling, the shift from civilian numbness to law enforcement instinct. It reminded him that fear wasn't gone from his life. It simply slept until something darker woke it. Bruno stepped closer to the fence, shoulders squared, muzzle shoved into the gap again. His breath came in sharp bursts. The fur along his back bristled like cold wires. Then came that sound again, one controlled bark of confirmation. Alert. Something alive. Something wrong. And Ethan's stomach twisted, knowing he couldn't ignore it. Before he could speak, a porch light snapped on next door. Becky stepped out into view, framed by the dim glow. Her thin arms crossed tightly, like she feared her bones would shatter without support. Her makeup had smudged, as if she'd run her hands across her face too many times tonight. She tried to appear calm, but her voice cracked as she called, "Everything all right over there?" Ethan forced a neighborly smile that felt like an old uniform he no longer fit into. "Sorry if my dog is bothering you. He's a bit keyed up today." Becky's eyes darted past Ethan toward the fence, and worry flickered there. Not fear of a dog, fear of discovery. "Maybe keep him inside," she said too quickly. "There's nothing here to sniff at. Rats, maybe. That's all." She turned as if to retreat, but a second figure stepped out behind her. Travis filled the doorway like a barricade. Thick forearms inked with faded tattoos, chest puffed as if he always needed to prove he was bigger than he felt. His shaved head glinted under the light. His expression was tight and annoyed. Someone whose patience for consequences had run short long ago. "Tell your dog to knock it off," he grunted. "People trying to live normal lives here." Ethan swallowed a retort. Travis was the kind of guy who spoke in fists when words didn't get him his way. And tonight, a fight might send Bruno through the fence before Ethan could stop it. "I'll take care of it," Ethan said, tugging lightly at Bruno's collar. But the dog didn't budge, his stance carved into the dirt like he was rooted by purpose. His nose lifted slightly, sniffing toward the garage. Then he emitted a desperate whine. Ethan had heard that sound only a handful of times. Once outside a collapsed house after an earthquake drill, and once in the woods when a missing child was found clinging to life. It was not a sound of fear. It was a plea to act. Becky's breathing quickened. "Just, please, keep him quiet," she insisted before hurrying Travis back inside. The porch light clicked off, swallowing them into darkness. Ethan's pulse still hammered. Normal people didn't panic when a dog sniffed around, unless normality was a mask too thin to hide the truth beneath it. Bruno nosed lower and lower along the fence line until he found a spot where the wood had softened near the soil. With a sudden surge, he broke a strip loose, jaws clamped on rotten fibers, pulling until there was a gap large enough to shove his head through. Ethan's voice jumped in fear. "Bruno, stop!" But Bruno was beyond command, driven by something primal. Survival sensed through scent. Ethan knelt, fingers brushing the ground, and that's when he felt it. A faint tremor under the dirt, a dull thud like a small shoe tapping wood, then another, faster, panicked. Ethan's breath hitched. That wasn't an animal. That was someone trying to be heard, choking on fear while the earth swallowed their cries. And suddenly, Ethan wasn't in Boise anymore. He was back in a burning building from years ago, screaming for a lost voice that never answered. Hannah trapped in a place he couldn't reach in time. Failure had carved itself into him like a scar. But this time, someone was still alive. Bruno's growl deepened. He pawed and scraped until the fence groaned again. Ethan's decision broke open like that would. "Okay," he whispered. "I hear you. We're not walking away." He rose to his feet, grabbed his phone, and moved toward his side gate, heading straight for the neighbor's front door. Bruno pressed against his leg, ready for whatever truth waited beneath the floor of that garage. Ethan didn't know what he expected. Child, animal, hostage, fear, but his mind locked on one truth: silence only helped monsters. As he stepped out onto the dark street, wind rustled the leaves overhead like whispers urging him forward. Bruno stayed close, muscles quivering with urgency. Ethan reached the sidewalk and muttered to himself with grim resolve, "If there's someone in there, we find them. Tonight." He and Bruno walked toward the house whose walls suddenly felt like a prison, and Ethan's fear of failing someone again marched beside him with every step. Ethan's knuckles struck the neighbor's front door hard enough to sting. Bruno pressed tight against his leg, tail stiff like a drawn line. His pulse hammered. He could still feel the vibration under the soil where someone had begged for help. Porch lights from farther down the street cast long, anxious shadows across the yard. He knocked again. "Becky! Travis, open up!" His voice was louder than intended, edged with authority he'd tried so hard to bury. The door opened just a crack, then wider. Becky stood there clutching a dish towel, pretending she'd been cleaning, but her eyes gave her away. Dilated, frantic, her pupils darting everywhere except at Ethan. The porch light carved hollows beneath her cheekbones, showing how gaunt she really was. "Is there a problem?" she asked, voice trembling beneath the fake politeness stretched thin over fear. Ethan kept his tone steady but cold. "We need to check your backyard. Something's not right." Becky forced a nervous laugh, shaking her head. "It's late. This is silly. It's just animals." Bruno suddenly pushed forward, surprising Ethan and forcing Becky to step back. His growl stopped her breath mid-sentence. From inside, hurried footsteps approached. Travis appeared wearing sweatpants and anger. Anger he used like armor any time he felt cornered. His bulk filled the doorway as he shoved Becky behind him with possessive irritation. "Get off my porch," he barked. "You're mutts, the only problem here." Ethan didn't flinch. "Something is moving under the ground by your garage, and I heard it. Knocking. A child-sized knock." Travis's face changed just for a moment, fear flashing like a glitch in his expression before turning into rage. "You're trespassing. Go home." He swung the door shut. Except Ethan stuck his boot between the jamb and the threshold. The door hit leather and stopped. "Move," Travis snarled. Ethan didn't. For a long moment, all three stood perfectly still except Bruno, who was trembling with focus, eyes locked toward the back of the house. Then, a noise, a tiny muffled sound, a tap, like knuckles weak from starvation. Ethan whispered, "You hear that?" Becky's face drained a color. Travis shoved harder on the door, but Ethan was stronger, trauma sharpening his instincts back into place. He shoved the door open. Becky stumbled backward, gasping. "Stop! Please! You can't!" "Call 911, Ethan ordered himself, dialing with shaking fingers. Dispatch answered. "This is former Officer Ethan Cole," he said, voice crisp and steady now, the voice he thought he'd lost. "Possible child endangerment. Send units to 415 Maple Crest Lane. Entry in progress." As he moved through the living room, the smell hit him. It wasn't decay, but something stale and enclosed. Fear kept in the dark too long. The house was dim, curtains drawn, air thick with neglect. A television hummed static in the corner, reflecting. Off-cluttered furniture coated with dust. No signs of a lived-in home, only signs of something being hidden. Travis grabbed Ethan's arm, but Ethan twisted away with trained reflexes. Bruno lunged between them, snarling, forcing Travis to back off with both palms raised. Becky ran toward the hall screaming, "Don't go out there!" Ethan didn't stop. He followed Bruno through the kitchen and out the back door, where cold, damp air slapped his face. Moonlight fell on the ragged weeds near the garage. The building looked even more sinister up close. Window boarded up, rust streaking down warped siding, padlock gleaming like a threat. Bruno sprinted ahead and dug frantically at the corner where boards met cracked concrete. Dirt flew as if desperation were fueling his muscles. Ethan dropped to his knees and helped, fingers clawing the earth. Then his knuckles wrapped something hollow, wood beneath soil. Bruno whined and scraped harder. Ethan brushed away grime and uncovered a metal ring bolt set into the ground. A hidden hatch. His heart lurched. "Hold on," he muttered downward, though he still saw nothing but darkness. He gripped the ring and pulled. It didn't budge. He planted his boots, pulled again, every muscle screaming. Wood splintered, hinges groaned, and the hatch tore open. A suffocating wave of warm, humid air belched out, thick with urine, mold, and human fear concentrated to nausea. Ethan coughed violently, eyes watering. Bruno barked sharply, desperate. Ethan shone his phone's flashlight into the hole. A whimper answered him. There, curled in the dirt, was a tiny German shepherd puppy, ribs visible beneath patchy fur, one paw lifted as if permanently shielding itself. Its dark eyes glistened in terror. But behind the puppy, partially hidden by rags, were two eyes larger, wider, belonging to a child. A little girl, no more than 6. Blonde hair matted to her skull, pale skin bruised in shades of purple and yellow, a small body trembling. She stared up like she wasn't sure if Ethan was real. Her cracked lips parted. A sound escaped, so soft he barely heard it. "Please, don't let them hurt Lucky again." Ethan's breath crushed inside his chest. His flashlight shook. "Hey, I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're safe now." But before he could reach down, the back porch light blazed behind him. Footsteps charging, rage exploding. Travis roared, "Get away from there!" Ethan spun, bracing himself as Bruno lunged to intercept. Chaos erupted behind him, but his eyes stayed locked on the girl in the dark. He would not fail this child. Not again. A shout tore across the backyard as Travis charged forward, his heavy boots pounding the dead grass like war drums. His face twisted with an animal kind of panic, pupils blown wide, jaw clenched so hard veins stood like blue cords along his neck. Ethan's instincts reacted before thought could catch up. He shifted sideways, planting his weight solidly in front of the open hatch. Bruno erupted into motion, a furious force of fur and muscle positioning himself between Ethan and danger. The dog's snarl was a guttural warning honed through years of service. Back off or face consequences. Travis hesitated just long enough for Ethan to bark the command. "Stay back, the police are on their way." The words didn't calm him, they ignited him. With a furious grunt, Travis reached behind his waistband and yanked free a rust-spotted wrench. His knuckles whitened around the handle. "Nobody takes what's mine," he spat. "She wasn't supposed to be found." That sentence froze Ethan colder than the night air ever could. A scream shattered the tension, thin, high, terrified. The little girl below, now fully visible under Ethan's flashlight, curled her tiny frame around the puppy, shielding him with a body far too small to protect anything. Lucky let out a fragile whimper, nuzzling into her chest. Without breaking eye contact with Travis, Ethan shouted down gently, "Hey, it's okay. Help is here." But his focus remained locked on the man wielding the wrench. Travis stepped closer, spittle flying from his rage-twisted mouth. "She's better off down there, quiet, obedient, grateful." Ethan's fists clenched. That was no excuse, just cruelty trying to disguise itself as discipline. Blue and red lights suddenly splashed across the wooden siding of the garage, flashing against fear like salvation. Sirens wailed louder as 2 police cruisers screeched to a stop in the driveway, spraying gravel. The back gate clanged open and officers stormed inside. Leading them was Officer Jenna Price, a 29-year-old woman of medium build with a freckled face, sharp hazel eyes, and a focused stride. Her auburn ponytail swung like punctuation behind every purposeful step. Raised in a strict military family, Price had a spine of iron and a compassion she guarded fiercely. Tonight, both traits lit her eyes like fire. "Police!" she shouted, drawing her weapon with a fluid movement. "Drop it now!" Travis whirled, sweat shining at his temples. He didn't drop the wrench, he lifted it. That single motion was all Ethan needed. Training flowed back into his bloodstream like muscle memory. He tackled Travis hard, driving his shoulder into the man's ribs. The wrench clattered to the ground as the two men wrestled. Ethan, fueled by fury and justice, Travis by desperation and guilt. Bruno circled them, barking commands only a handler would understand. Finish this. Protect the child. Price and another officer, a tall black man named Officer Derrick, Nolan, broad-shouldered with a trimmed beard and calm steel in his eyes, swarmed in, yanking Travis's arms behind his back and cuffing him with swift precision. "Get off me!" Travis thrashed, voice cracking beneath tears of rage. "She was too loud. She ruined everything." His words were confession soaked in madness. Becky stumbled into the yard next, still in her faded pajamas, mascara streaking down her cheeks like smeared ink. She froze when she saw the open hatch, her facade of denial crumbling at the sight of officers shining flashlights into the darkness. Officer Nolan grabbed her by the wrists before she could flee. "You're under arrest for child endangerment, unlawful imprisonment." "No!" Becky shrieked, thrashing. "It wasn't me. Travis said we had to—" Her excuses dissolved in the air, useless against the evidence in the dirt. Ethan dropped to his knees again, ignoring the sting of scratches on his arms. "I'm coming down," he whispered. He lowered himself into the cramped, foul-smelling pit, flashlight trembling in his grip. The little girl stared at him with eyes too old for her years, ocean blue but clouded by trauma. Her sunken cheeks glistened with tears. "Are you going to hurt us?" she whispered. The question sliced Ethan open. "No," he breathed, voice shaken with anger at the world. "No one hurts you ever again." He gathered her cautiously. She was feather light, every rib counted beneath his touch, her small hands clutching Lucky as though the puppy were the last thread tying her to hope. "Bruno, watch our six," Ethan murmured, and the dog positioned himself protectively at the edge of the ditch. With the girl cradled safely in his arms and Lucky held tight to her chest, Ethan climbed out, Price steadying him as his feet landed on the ground. Ambulance lights cast a hopeful glow over the scene, sirens fading into night. For the first time in what felt like years, Ethan's heartbeat aligned with purpose again. He whispered to the girl, "I've got you." But inside, he also vowed he would never let her fear the dark again. Boise Memorial Hospital glowed soft and white beneath the calm Idaho night, its windows lit like promises against the darkness. Inside, Ethan sat on a small plastic chair beside a hospital bed far too big for the little girl lying in it. Emma Clark, 6 years old, skin porcelain pale under clean bandages, stared up at the ceiling as if afraid to close her eyes and return to the suffocating dark below that garage. Her blonde hair, once matted with dirt, now fanned across the pillow in neat, freshly washed strands. She hugged Lucky, the tiny German Shepherd puppy curled up at her side, his breathing shallow but steady. His fur had been cleaned, patches still thin where bruises marked his fragile ribs. A nurse had tried to move the dog earlier, but Emma's panic had risen so quickly her heart monitor spiked into alarm, and they all realized the puppy was the only medicine her mind could accept right now. Across the room, a pediatric trauma doctor reviewed charts. Dr. Karen Brooks was a woman in her early 40s, white, tall, and athletic, with shoulder-length light brown hair and gentle blue eyes behind rectangular glasses. Her calm voice held a quiet authority shaped by years of saving young lives and losing some too, but she never let sorrow dull her purpose. She stepped to the bedside. "Emma," she said softly, "your body is healing well, and Lucky's getting better too. You're both safe tonight." Emma didn't respond with words. Her hand just found Lucky's ear, trembling fingers twisting soft fur for reassurance. Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. His clothes were still stained from dirt and sweat, knuckles scraped from the fight. But exhaustion couldn't dull the fierce protectiveness burning inside him. "I'm not leaving," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone. His voice made Emma turn her face slightly toward him. "You came," she whispered. It was the first voluntary sentence she'd spoken. Ethan's throat tightened. "Bruno told me you needed help." He motioned to the large German shepherd lying guard at the door. Bruno had not rested since the rescue, head always lifted, amber eyes never straying from Emma. A knock sounded before the door slid open. A man stepped in, mid-30s, white, rough-looking but not cruel, with messy brown hair and a face written in shock and regret. This was Ryan Clark, Emma's father. His work boots still carried road dust. He had driven through the night the moment he learned what had happened. Sleepless guilt reddened his eyes, and his hands shook as if afraid of what he'd touch. "Emma?" His voice cracked like a branch under snow. Emma flinched, fear instinctive, but Ethan placed a steady hand on the bed. "He's your dad," Ethan said gently. "He's here now." Ryan stepped closer, dropping to his knees. "I should have known. I should have protected you." Tears finally broke free, his shoulders shaking. "I'm so sorry, baby." "Girl." Slowly, Emma let her gaze rise to him. Fraud, Ward with recognition. Lucky, sensing her hesitation, let out a tiny encouraging yip. Emma crept one hand from beneath the blanket and placed it against her father's seed, small, tentative forgiveness. Ryan broke completely then, leaning forward but careful not to crush the puppy or the child. "Thank you," he gasped toward Ethan, "for finding her, for not giving up." Ethan only nodded, his heart heavy with memories of the woman he couldn't save, and lighter with joy that this time he had arrived in time. Hours later, the chaos quieted. Officers Price and Nolan, paperwork in hand, briefed Ethan. Becky and Travis were being processed. Charges were mounting. CPS would intervene, but Ryan had already accepted conditions, counseling, supervision reviews, anything to keep his daughter. A new figure arrived then, Margaret Sanders, a CPS agent in her late 50s, white, short gray bob, warm hazel eyes that recognized trauma without fear. She carried the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much harm, yet still believed in healing. "Mr. Clark," she addressed Ryan, "reunification is our goal when safe. And with Officer Cole's statement, with your cooperation, we can keep Emma with family. But she will need support. Both of you will." Ryan nodded vigorously. "Whatever it takes." Margaret turned to Ethan, soft gratitude warming her features. "You never had to get involved, but you did." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Bruno refused to let me ignore it." Bruno's tail thumped once, modest acknowledgement. Dr. Brooks returned with good news. Lucky's vitals strong, Emma improving fast with food and warmth, no internal injuries. She smiled with real relief. Children can heal in ways that surprise us. As dawn stretched pale pink across the sky, Emma finally slept deeply, for the first time in who knew how long. With Lucky's nose tucked beneath her chin, at the foot of the bed, Ryan dozed in a chair, hand still holding his daughter's. And at the door, 2 German shepherds kept watch. One old and battle-worn, one tiny and newly rescued, both bound by the same vow, never again. Ethan stepped out to the hallway, leaning against the wall, finally breathing. Light poured through the windows, washing away shadows. He whispered to himself and to Hannah's memory, maybe this is how I start living again. Inside the room, a little girl had found her way back to safety. A father had found a second chance. And Ethan, broken but standing, had rediscovered purpose in the quiet courage of a dog who refused to look away. Sometimes God's miracles arrive on 4 paws and speak through a single bark. When we feel lost in the dark, He sends protectors to remind us that hope is never buried too deep to be found. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Leave a comment below, subscribe for more stories of courage and compassion, and may God bless you and your loved ones with safety, healing, and light now and always.